So sense of purpose actually adds 7 years of life expectancy. Well, stress is actually the number one driver of disease and aging. I get to remind people that they are their best medicine. There's no prescription medicines, no prescription drugs. Yes, I practice the science of longevity. I have some of those tools to help people, but living and consciously creating a beautiful life, that's the art of living. And that's the best biohack anyone can do.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And on today's podcast, I bring you a conversation I have with MK in the All In podcast. Every now and then I'll do a podcast with somebody, and I feel it is really important that our audience gets to hear some of the message of health, happiness, and human potential as well. Again, this podcast is from the All In podcast, so check it out. The All In podcast can be found on Spotify, iTunes, and wherever podcasts are heard. The host is MK. You'll find a really delightful conversation of a little bit of my backstory, a little bit about bioenergetics and how it is our consciousness that really dictates the result that we have in life, whether it be health, whether it be happiness, or whether it be achieving our human potential. Now, before we get into the podcast, let me first say, if you're new to the Thrive State Podcast, welcome in. This is a place where we bring thought leaders, experts in the areas of health, longevity, wellness, business, really any area that's going to allow you to elevate your life to the next level. And if you are new to the podcast, please do us a favor, subscribe to it, because I guarantee you, you are going to receive the information that will just might be that nugget to get through the day, the week, to elevate your health, your happiness, your potential. So go ahead, subscribe to the podcast, engage with us, because it's going to help the podcast grow. Now, I also have a gift for everybody who is joining us now, because I put together a longevity and performance bundle. In that bundle is a longevity ebook, longevity lecture slides, resources, as well as breathwork exercises to be able to get you more calm, more energy, and a great breathwork morning routine for you. All this is bundled up free at thrivestatestarter.com. So if you are new to my world and want to dive in just a little bit deeper, go to thrivestatestarter.com. You'll get tons of free resources sent to your inbox. So this is where I normally talk about the speaker. And today the speaker is me. Well, if you haven't already known or followed me, I'm Dr. Kien Vuu. People call me Dr. V for short. And I was once an interventional radiologist. I was trained in traditional medicine. I got board certification in diagnostic and interventional radiology, as well as anti-aging and regenerative medicine. And I had a story of transformation. I mean, 7 years ago, overweight, diabetic, had high blood pressure, on prescription medications. But that was really because I was playing a program in my brain that gave me the signals of stress that then programmed how my cell behaved. What do cells do in the state of stress? Well, inflammation goes up, your immune system goes down, it makes your cells not functional very optimally. That puts you prone to getting chronic symptoms and chronic disease. And what you'll uncover on today's podcast is, as we shift our consciousness from that, not in a survival and stress mode, but really back to our natural state of love, of feeling connected, of feeling safe, we could shift the messages that we give to our DNA. This is the power of epigenetics. This is the power of making a conscious choice towards the person that you want to be, the conscious choice of having the health, the happiness, and the potential that you know life has in store for you. And so this is what today's podcast is all about. And I'm super excited also to promote a mental health summit that will be launching free for everybody in December, called the Thrive State Summit. You can start to visit thrivestatesummit.com and register for free. We've got tons of speakers, including Bruce Lipton, Miriam Hemingway, Vishen Lakhiani, Dave Asprey. The list goes on. It's probably one of the most proudest projects I've been a part of. And it was really inspired by, a friend that I lost about a year ago, who was really one of my life's biggest cheerleaders. And after losing him, I really felt like I wanted to extend the frequency that he was and give people the tools for health, particularly in mental health. So please, this is something you're going to probably want to share with your friends, your families, your organizations, because I interview 50 of the top leaders in the health wellness space, speaking on chronic stresses we have in our relationships, in our health, in our businesses, and how to deal with these stresses so that we could become the best versions of ourselves. Check it out, ThriveStateSummit.com, and share it with your friends and family. And for now, please enjoy this conversation from the All In podcast with host MK.
I'm MK, I'm your host.
Hi, I'm Dr. V, or Kien Vuu, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert.
Dr. V, thanks for being here.
Hey, it's a pleasure, MK.
What's the science of longevity versus the art of living?
Great question. I talk about this when, I'm on a lot of longevity conferences, and I talk about these two things. We have the science of longevity. Right now, the technology that we have are promising to extend the human lifespan further than we ever thought possible. 120, 150, 180, some people are talking. We're talking about diagnostics, right? We can check for cancers very, very early on these days. We've got gene editing. So if there's like a base pair in your genes that are missing, we can go in and edit it. We can start to grow new organs in organ transplantation. There are new drugs like rapamycin that is proving to extend life. There's all this science that's out there right now. And I'm super excited about it. I practice some of it. However, right now we look to where people are living longest in the world. We're talking about populations like Okinawa, Japan. We're talking about Costa Rica. We're talking about Loma Linda, California. These places called the blue zones.
Yes.
They actually don't have access to any of this technology. They don't have access to the science of longevity. So why are they living so long?
Okay.
Dan Beutner wrote a book called The Blue Zones,
Right.
where they actually study where the people live the longest. And they come up with common traits. They actually moved all day. They actually had deep connections with friends, family members, community, and a tribe. They didn't stuff themselves with food. All but the Loma Lindens actually enjoyed some wine every now and then. And they all had a sense of purpose. So how does living a certain way drive our biology? And this is what I write about in my book, Thrive State, because how we live our life is actually medicine. That is the art of living. And so when I studied why these people were living so long, I started to also study, is there molecular basis for why they were living so long? And this is a pretty new science. It came out maybe about 15 years ago of epigenetics.
Okay.
Epi meaning above, genetics meaning genes that tell us that the fate of our cells isn't determined by the genes that come with it. The fate of our cells, our longevity, our performance, our health is not determined by the genes that are in our cells, but actually how the genes interact with its cellular environment. It's the things right outside the cells that actually determine how a cell behaves. So the question is, can our choices affect our cellular environment? Does the way we live our life affect our cellular environment? And absolutely yes. And so I studied how people lived in the blue zones and started to look, does it actually change the environment around the cells? And absolutely. There are 5 main levers that actually determine the cellular environment. What are they? They are physical, which includes our sleep, nutrition, and movement.
Okay.
They are also mental. Our thoughts, our emotions actually control that environment. Our social being, how we connect with people, and finally having that sense of purpose actually changes the environment around ourselves. So the way we live our life in those 5 areas actually creates this state of ourselves, this cellular environment. And when we choose to live that way, we're actually activating the biology of performance and longevity. So here's the good news. What drives longevity, what drives health, what drives our performance is the choices that we make in every single moment, which means that the power to access that biology is within you and within me and within our choices.
Sense of purpose?
Yeah. So sense of purpose actually adds 7 years of life expectancy. When you have a sense of purpose, if you end up in the hospital, you spend fewer days in the hospital. A sense of purpose also radically reduces your risk of getting cardiovascular disease, which is the #1 killer all around the world. And they looked at this. I actually have a colleague over at UCLA that studied this. They called the sense of purpose eudaimonic happiness. So eudaimonic happiness is the happiness that you feel when you feel like you're connected to something bigger, when you're giving of yourself. All right? And there's a reason for that. We'll talk about old programming in a second. But what happens is that if you're not worried about yourself, you're turning off the survival mode of your brain. And if you're focusing on serving somebody else, you're basically turning down that survival mode, which actually increases stress in our body. And then it opens up the biology of performance and longevity. So a sense of purpose, actually, we could actually see molecular changes in your cells. Your telomeres are preserved. It actually shuts down one of the cell danger responses called the conserved transcriptional response to adversity. So we see all these things happening. So what is purpose? Well, Pablo Picasso said, the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. I only think he's half right. I mean, who is this guy anyway, Pablo Picasso? I think it's more of a process of remembering than finding.
Okay.
Yeah, when you remember the things that light you up, when you remember the things that bring you joy, when you remember the things that just make you feel good, those are actually anti-aging emotions. That actually is encoded in your genes. The thing that light you up, that's who you are. It's in your genes. And when you are in those emotional states, that's who you are authentically. And when you just share you authentically with the world, just you, MK, I just share Kien, that's our purpose. Just sharing us with other people. And purpose can also come from maybe all the shit, all the obstacles, all the challenges we've been gifted with in life, because through them we can grow, we can become more resilient. And when we grow, we have more to give. And so that's purpose. And purpose actually is medicine.
What about stress? How do you define stress today? And what does it do to the body? And what does it do to aging and longevity? What is it? How do you measure it?
Okay. Well, stress is actually the #1 driver of disease and aging. And the body finds stress basically in multiple different ways and actually drives inflammation. So let me talk about one of the stress danger responses in the body called the CTRA, or conserved transcriptional response to adversity. Now, back in the day, there were saber-toothed tigers and there were neighboring villages wanting to attack you. And when that happens, this CTRA actually gets activated. So when it senses stress out there, basically it turns on genes that increase inflammation. Because what if you get like a flesh wound to your body? It needs to be able to repair that. And it'll lower genes for immunity. Because why spend your body's energy on fighting against cancer or infection when you're about to be somebody's lunch? So basically, when your body senses stress, inflammation goes up, your immune system goes down. That basically puts you prone to chronic diseases like heart disease, like Alzheimer's, like diabetes, like basically every single chronic disease when you get stressed. And so how do you measure stress in the body?
Yes.
You can measure in multiple different ways. There's a lot of correlates for stress. There are basically some inflammatory markers in the body, such as IL-1, IL-6, TNF alpha. There's also another marker for inflammation called the ESR or the CRP. All these are lab values, but those are ways to kind of measure it. But basically what happens is you have more inflammation that's going on in your body. And inflammation is basically the root cause of so many chronic symptoms and diseases. It not only brings down your performance in multiple different levels, your thinking, your physical performance, your emotional performance, but it also ages you quicker and again, puts you prone to the chronic diseases I talked about.
So before we did this interview, I just got a shitty call from work.
Yeah.
And I was on the phone for like, I don't know, maybe like an hour.
Yeah.
And I was late. I was getting stressed from the call. I'm trying to hang up. And
Yeah.
I'm getting stressed that I'm keeping you. So if you and I have the same call,
Yeah.
you manage stress better than I do, or I manage. How do you do that? Like, if it's just the same call, you get a shitty call from work.
Yeah.
Let's reverse it.
Yeah.
And you're gonna interview me,
Yeah.
and you're late for me.
Yeah.
You're apologetic. You're like, how do you do that? Like, is stress something that you can work on? Like you can.
Absolutely.
How?
Because the thing is,
It's a shitty call regardless.
stress is perceived, right?
Okay.
Was there a saber-toothed tiger about to attack you? Were you falling off a building? Were you actually in danger? No, you had a phone call with somebody that basically activated the stress response in your body, right? Now, there's a quote from Viktor Frankl I love. People don't know who Viktor Frankl is. He's a Holocaust survivor. He saw his father being starved to death. He saw his mother and brother murdered. He saw friends and family members tortured. Pretty stressful, right?
Absolutely.
But he still had this to say. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. And basically, I apply this thing into a model I teach people, the impact model. I teach people as to how to handle things that are stressful to you. Impact, what's it stand for? The I am is basically who do you want to be in the world?
Okay.
You create that from a fresh place. You have to create that from a place, get yourself out of your normal routine life. Make sure you exercise, put yourself in an awesome state, and then create. Do you want to be playful? Do you want to be confident? Do you want to be a leader? Do you want to be generous? Do you want to be giving? You create that. That's your I am, and you choose. Doesn't matter what your past is, you choose, but you have to see that person as that thing. You need to have a clear vision of what your I am is. And the next part of the impact model is PACT, which is pause and then act. Okay, so Viktor Frankl says, between stimulus and response, there's a space. So create space by pausing. So if I were you in that situation, maybe just like, and I do this all the time because I have a fiance that triggers the crap out of me. And I have to remember, okay, I got to pause. And how do you pause? You can go for a walk out in nature. You can take 10 deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. You can go work out, but then you pause. When you pause, basically you're quieting down what you are reacting against. So what I would suggest is every time we feel stress and there's actually no saber-tooth tiger behind us,
Sure.
That is our brain perceiving something that's off. And that is something I called old programming, which we could talk about in a second. Our old program is saying, okay, there's something off here and we're reacting to it. When you create space, you're basically weakening that response to whatever that old programming of stress, and then you pause. Then you act once you create that space, which is have awareness, choice, and then take action. Have the awareness. Oh, shoot, I'm reacting right now. They said something and this triggered maybe some not enoughness in me. Maybe it triggered this not worthiness in me. And you just ask yourself, how am I reacting? And you're like, oh, okay, this is old programming that I'm reacting to. And then you make that choice. You could either continue on with that stress and go on with that old programming, or you're like, no, I want myself to be generous, loving, playful, a really awesome person. And you're going to choose anyway, even when it's hard. You're going to choose. I'm like, okay, I do this with my fiance all the time. I take a break and then I choose. No, I want to be loving. And so the next thing I do is immediately take action, which is the T. It might look like, honey, look, I just reacted. This is some old programming. It's coming up in me. I want to show up loving. I want to be connected. Can we just pause for a couple minutes and start back over? And
What if she says no? She still wants to fight.
Then I know that she's also in her program too.
So what do you do then?
Give her space. Give her that space and then come back in that new version of yourself. Because when you come back as that loving, connected person, and when you're curious, not judging that person who's mad at you, because I used to be somebody who would judge, oh my God, they're attacking me. And I would react. But can I be curious? Maybe there's something old programming in her that I activated. What could that be? I'm curious. And when you come with curiosity, when you come with love, I'll tell you, man, magic will happen. And the more you do that, the more you do this impact model and making new choices over your old programming, you are rewiring your entire body and nervous system into this new state. I call it the Thrive state.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. If you are, I just wanted to let you know, join our community. There's so many free resources and a great community of people that desire health, happiness, human potential, to have more in their life, more health, more energy, and when you have those two things together, you could create more happiness, more abundance, whether it be financial, romantic, all these things in your life. And if you're just starting out, you don't know where to go, just sign up for thrivestatestarter.com, because in there you're going to get a bundle of information that includes a longevity ebook, a longevity and performance resource guide, lecture notes that come from my keynotes at Google, at Fortune 500 companies, all the insights in that keynote in lecture slide form given to you. And then finally, breathwork. I share 3 powerful breathwork exercises to access calm, which really gives you clarity and peace during the day, to access energy if you need to wake up and really motivate yourself, and finally a breathwork routine that you could do every single morning so that you could be very intentional with how you create that day. You could find all this stuff delivered free to your inbox at thrivestatestarter.com. And our community is growing. If you want to be a part of a community of people that desire the Thrive State, that are really in Thrive State themselves, and help other people along with that, you could be a part of the community. You can get group coaching from me. We do breathwork sessions, meditation sessions, and you also get to drop in and participate in podcasts in the future. You could find more about the community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. So check out those resources. You're not going to be disappointed. And please enjoy the remainder of this podcast.
And that's magic, the impact model. Create space and then act.
So are you now a calm person?
I wouldn't say, no, I still react.
You still do?
I still react. But here's what I want to teach people. It's basically the mastery levels of adopting this new version of yourself. Right? We've got this old programming, old version of ourselves, which we should talk about, this default mode network. Basically, most people run off a program that they learned, and this program was designed before the age of 10. So all the trauma in your life, every hurt that you've been through, parents, teachers, media, all these things get programmed within the age of 10, and we're running off that programming. And a lot of times, running through that old programming doesn't lead us to our very best selves. We need to be able to upgrade, but you have to be able to see the old programming. So here's the 4 levels of mastery. At the first level is unconscious incompetence, meaning you don't even know that you're in a programming. You're basically a fish in water, not knowing that you're in water. So you're basically always reacting, and that's normal to you. Okay. And so you don't even know. The next level up is actually conscious incompetence. Now, this is the worst place to be in, because you catch yourself being very reactive and you start beating yourself up. Oh my God, why did I just do that? I've reacted again, crap. So this is the worst place to be in, because you start to catch yourself and you don't want to be that kind of person. But I tell the people, now you've actually accelerated from level 1 to level 2. So you know that you're in the process of evolution. You're in the process of becoming that better version of yourself when you're in level 2. Because the next part after that is conscious competence, meaning now whenever something comes up, you could pause and you can do that impact model. You could pause and act and choose something new, meaning you start to react. Ooh, something's coming up. I need to take 10 deep breaths. I'm going to make a new choice. And it requires a little bit of energy, right? You do that enough times, you're going to rewire your nervous system. And finally, that last level is unconscious competence, meaning you don't even have to think about it anymore. Somebody pisses you off. Oh, okay. Something's going on in them and not me. I'm still cool. And I'm in that process of evolution all the time. I jump from level 2 to level 3 all the time. I wouldn't say I'm in level 4 yet, but over time, what will you notice? You'll notice that the time you react will probably be less. The duration in which you act will be less, and the intensity of how you react will become less. And this is basically the evolution of who we are as human beings, is becoming more than the survival mode of our brain.
What would you say to someone saying, that sounds great, where we are here in LA, you have the luxury of this, you see the sky blue, but what if I live in X country and there's like 100 million people, traffic is 6 hours, I don't have the luxury of unplugging like you. What would you say to someone like that?
Well, I mean, that's the realities of the world. And to that, one, I recognize I'm very grateful to be where I'm at, to be a place that doesn't have war and all those type of things. But it really makes me think about the passionate leaders who have made very, very tough choices in situations, such as Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor, saw so many people die around him, but still made that choice. It reminds me of people like Nelson Mandela, who was thrown in jail for 27 years while he was in jail, was tortured against, humiliated, told, wasn't able to see his wife or his children while he was in jail because he stood up against something like apartheid, against institutionalized racism. So he went through all that torture, but he still made a choice. He was still able to choose the meaning in his life. So at the end of the day, we'll never be able to choose the circumstances in life that we have. What we can choose is the meaning we give to things, and we can choose how we show up, the energy that we create. And I would say this, is if you're that type of person that can make that choice in those circumstances, your ability to be what my good friend Vishen says, unfuckwithable, is much higher than anyone else. It is through people that have taken these circumstances that are just so dire that are still able to make choices above their circumstances that are the people we all admire, like Oprah Winfrey, like Nelson Mandela, like Viktor Frankl.
The U-turn that someone has to make.
Yeah.
There's no age limit on it. So if I listen to you today and I say, man, I'm obese or I'm always stressed over nothing, or that, honestly, that call, you're right, there was no tiger, there was no lion, there was nothing.
Yeah.
I'm still here in LA. We're still having an interview.
Yeah.
But that U-turn, is there rules to take that U-turn? So I decide today, I'll read the book and I'll decide to take, say, 50% of it.
Yeah.
I'll do it by myself. Obviously, there's a decision.
Yeah.
That I'm going to be not stress-free, but
Yeah.
stress-less, as an
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
Right? Is there a point in time, is it easier when you're younger? Is it harder when you're older to take that U-turn and say, okay, I'm going to change? And what if you're associated with people around you? What if you're in a toxic marriage? Or what if you're in a toxic partnership? Or do you just get rid of everything? Like, how does this thing work?
You bring up such just awesome questions. Is it easier to change when you're younger? Absolutely. Because like I was mentioning before, in fact, you know what? Let's talk about the default mode network. The default mode network, scientists are beginning to learn a part of the brain that links up lots of different centers. It links up the amygdala, which is the fear center, okay, which remembers fear, your hippocampus, which is the memory center, into these medial parts of our brain, like the medial frontal cortex, the medial posterior cingulate gyrus. And basically all this to say that we've got this program from the time that we're conceived till about the age of 10, we're taking on all this information. Media, teachers, parents, it takes on all this information. What it's doing is it's making up beliefs and models about the world. It's making up where we fit in the world. And here's the thing. It's an autopilot survival mode of our brain. So it's there to help us survive. So what else does it do? It's constantly looking for what can hurt us. So that's why there's a negativity bias. People that, most people I know have some form of belief that I'm not enough or I'm not worthy of love. And there's a reason for that, because we need to belong. So it lives here in this default mode network. And unless we're conscious of it, we are making choices from this autopilot, conditioned survival mode of the brain. So when we look at choices around the world, like the war in Ukraine, Aubrey Marcus or George Floyd or the attack on the Capitol, all these choices where people choose violence, where do you think they're choosing from? The survival mode of the brain. And unless people become conscious of that, they're making choices from that place. So you ask the question, is it easier to change when you're younger? Yes, because people get programmed, this default mode gets programmed when you're kids. So when we change ourselves, we not only change ourselves, but the energy, the vibration that we create and we spread to others, the kids feel it too. So now they can be upgraded in their programming when they get a little bit older. So it's easier to change when they're kids, but it's never too late to change. Even though you've gone through the same pattern over and over and over in your life, you just have to make that decision. And here's the important point, is to decide. Decide has the same root as suicide, which means that part is to die or to cut off. And so when you decide, you better cut off any other chance of that thing not happening. So if you decide, I want to become this better version of myself, okay, cut everything off, make that decision. But does it mean throwing out, everything, throwing out your life? Look, everybody is going to have a very different path. I know, like, for example, in a relationship, it might not always be easy. My relationship is super messy. I've got my old programming, they got their old programming, and guess what? It's going to trigger the hell out of each other. Mm-hmm. And I look at it and like, wow, you know what? If I actually was with the person that, was so-called the perfect person for me, would I be able to grow as much? Probably not. Because now I could understand, I could see the old programming. Now I could, see it within me, and I get to practice this impact model of creating space and making new choices over and over and over again. And so this relationship is the emotional gym for me to grow, but it takes somebody that wants to grow with you at the same time. So that might not be the same in every single situation, but recognize that you can choose. And here's the thing. I'm a longevity and performance doctor. 5-6 years ago, I was doing surgeries, minimally invasive surgeries. I've used all this fancy technology to help people, with their chronic diseases. But 5-6 years ago, I was overweight, diabetic, had high blood pressure. I was on prescription medications.
Really?
I was. And I didn't realize that I wasn't necessarily given the tools to be well in medical school, which is why I did so much additional training. I studied with shamans, I studied nutrition, epigenetics, anti-aging, and longevity medicine. And now I feel like I've got some tools. And here's the tools that's most exciting, that the science of epigenetics really kind of puts the power of our health and our longevity and our performance back into us. So making the choices, particularly in those 5 levers I talked about, physical, mental, social, emotional, spiritual, we create the choices that we make. We create this energetic state. We create a life force in our body. And that's what our DNA listens to. So are you giving your DNA the signals that you are living your best life, in which case it will grant you with more life? Or are you giving the signals to your DNA that a saber-toothed tiger is behind you? Oh. Because when you're in that state, if the saber-toothed tiger, what did I say happens there? Inflammation goes up, your immune system goes down, you're not going to perform well, chronic symptoms and chronic disease.
When did you make that U-turn? Like, at what point in your life?
It was about 6 years ago.
Was there a reason behind
it? I would probably say back then, probably the lowest part of my life. I was, I should talk a little bit about my life. I, wasn't born in America. I was a boat refugee, born in post-war Vietnam. I was on a refugee boat for 8 months. I was in a Philippine refugee camp for 3 months. And one would think, oh, wow, you survived all that. I was actually the only infant to survive that boat journey. You would think that a kid that survived those circumstances would be so grateful growing up. Well, I grew up in Chinatown, Los Angeles, as being a very poor family. And I remember, being teased for the holes in my hand-me-down clothes, for the pungent food my mom sent me to school with. Go back to your home country, Chinky.
Yeah.
And so that gave me my old program. My old programming was, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, not tall enough, not American enough, not rich enough. This is all the programming. And that old programming said success would solve it all. And so I strived for success. I ended up in medical school, top residency program, studied at the National Institutes of Health, Howard Hughes Medical Institute, kept striving.
But that was the driver?
That was the driver, of the feeling of not enough, which brings me to a quote. I basically, when I was probably 40 pounds heavier than I am now with diabetes, which made me the poster child of a famous Dalai Lama quote when he asked what he found most interesting about humanity. Mm-hmm. He said, man, because he would sacrifice his health in order to make money, and then sacrifice his money to recuperate his health. Yes. And so many people I know, most of my clients right now have that same story. They've achieved success, but at the point of not loving themselves and chasing this thing, rather than knowing that success is a being, it's a feeling that you can cultivate within yourself, even without the external circumstances.
So at what point did you decide to change?
At what point did I decide to change? It was a year in my life. I was basically chief of interventional radiology in my hospital, bought a fancy car, fancy house, everything in my, that I was told to make me feel worthy and happy, yet I was miserable. Not only that year did I get my chronic disease diagnosis of diabetes and high blood pressure, I was, in a relationship and they left me because I was so not into them, but into growing myself.
Yeah.
I lost a close uncle to cancer, and I didn't spend enough time with him when he passed. And then I had this huge tear in my shoulder, and I was told I might not be able to operate anymore.
Wow.
16 plus years of my life training for this thing, and all of a sudden it's going to be taken away from me.
It's pretty dark.
Everything I thought I was working towards, everything in my old programming at that moment said, you'll never be worthy. Your life is crap. And I remember one incident that kind of changed it. I remember I was rounding the hospital and I was going to do a very simple procedure that didn't require my shoulder, where I was supposed to drain 10 liters of fluid from this guy. When you have cancer, this guy was basically the same age as me, terminal pancreatic cancer. So he had this belly filled, 10 liters of fluid in his belly. And I remember looking at the chart, oh my God, I want to meet this guy. I'm feeling like I'm like pretty low already, but like, I better get myself together to meet this guy. I remember opening the door and I just get hit with his positive energy and his big, bright smile. His name is Ishmael. And he's like, hey, Doc, how are you, man? I can't wait for you to drain this fluid from me because it's getting in the way of sexy time, if you know what I mean. And I just remember he broke me out of my pattern of me feeling sorry for myself. Like, how is this guy so happy? And I asked him, I was like, how are you so happy, Ishmael? And because look, trust me, Doc, it didn't always used to be this way. I used to be stressed out all the time. But I realized the only thing I have control over is how I choose to show up. And I choose to show up with love and positivity. That's it, man. And I was like, wow. Here's a guy who's about to die, reminding me about how to live. And reminding me that the power of choice is there for us at any given moment in time. And so all those things happened to me, but really they happened for me.
Right. For
me to see that I was running in this old programming and that I could start making some new choices. And that was 5-6 years ago. And haven't really looked back. Now I feel like I've got more energy. I've lost all the inflammatory visceral fat that I have. I'm looking at my lab tests. I've actually biologically aged backwards. I've got a great family in my life now, and now I get to teach about longevity and health. And here's the thing. I get to remind people that they are their best medicine. There's no prescription medicines, no prescription drugs. Yes, I practice the science of longevity. I have some of those tools to help people. But the art of living, my friend, living and consciously creating a beautiful life, that's the art of living. And that's the best biohack anyone can do.
The art of living.
The art of living.
So I have one last question.
Yeah.
What's the next big thing for you? You've come through this transformation. You've written a book.
Yeah.
You seem happy.
Yeah.
Right. But fast forward to that next big thing. Just tell me what that is.
Yeah.
What does it look like?
Well, I have to go back to when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I wanted to be on TV. I kind of wanted to I looked at Tony Robbins, Robin Williams, Mick Jagger. I'm like, I want to do that. But when I saw the people that looked like me on TV, I'm like, I don't know any martial arts. And now really, I think the opportunity is this. I haven't really lived a life that had a message, but now the message is really, you can actually own the power of your health, your longevity, and performance. It's all in the choices that you make moment to moment. So how do you wake people up to that?
Yeah.
I'm going to bring that childhood dream back into existence. Media and entertainment. Use that as platforms, as a Trojan horse to deliver medicines, to let people know that they are actually in control of their health and their destiny and their success and all of these things. So the next big thing is become the next iteration of a doctor using media and entertainment to let people know that you are your best medicine.
Super powerful. Super cool. Thanks so much for being here, Dr. B.
Hey,
really appreciate
pleasure.
it. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if this podcast is bringing a lot of value to you, if you find that your life is just improving with this podcast, that your life is getting to the next level, please consider supporting it. And here's a few ways you can do so. You can do so by liking this video and commenting on this video, and also sharing this video with your friends and family. Another thing you can do is go to ratethispodcast.com/ThriveState. Go ahead and leave us a 5-star review there. It will really, really help this show grow. And this will give me more time so that I could actually give more content to you, just like you got in this episode. And if you haven't already picked up a copy of my book, Thrive State, Your Blueprint for Optimal Health, Longevity, and Peak Performance, you can pick it up now. It became a #1 new release in longevity. Go to thrivestatebook.com. And if you enjoy the book, please consider leaving us a review as well. And the last thing you can do, if you're liking everything here and you want to work more closely with me as well as my team to get you into the Thrive State, go to kienvuu.com/accelerator and consider joining the home course, the Thrive State Accelerator. It's really the course that I use. It's the concepts that I use personally when I work with CEOs, celebrities, and my high-profile clients to get them to the Thrive State. Again, the Thrive State Accelerator at kienvuu.com/accelerator. And because you're a listener of this podcast, I want you to save 25% by using the coupon code podcast25. I hope we continue to give value to you. And remember always, you are your best medicine.